So I did a post on Instagram that I'm going to share with you now.
I'm from outer space. I got Milky Way for blood, evolution in my veins. I'm gone, I've been far away. I'm illuminated now, make a move, start a waves. I've been dreaming about flying for a long time. I had a vision from the birds, they want a cosign. Yeah, artificially intelligent AI. I'm your future, past and present, I'm a fine line. Yeah, I'm a missing link of this illusion. I am not really here, I'm an intrusion. I don't swim or sink, I just float.
Okay, so let's break it down a little bit. I want to give you 6 ways that survival instinct, protector instinct, and nurturer, that instinct to nurturer, show up in your everyday jobs at work. I don't care if you're a man, a woman, if you are, what age group you're in, what your income level, what your job title is, how long you've been in that career or industry. You have a way that these instincts are showing up in your everyday life and affecting your interactions with others. We're going to say for the good, sometimes for the not so good. But in this case, I really want to just highlight that you think, well, that's not really something that I deal with a lot. I'm not really in my instinctual mind. I'm in my logic brain, or I'm in my learned brain, or I'm in my experience. I'm really in my field and I'm operating from my experience. And so I don't need to rely on my instincts. Instincts are for people who aren't learned. And that may be an oversight if you really believe that. Because there are these opportunities in every day, in every moment, that you have to really connect and work on your humanity. And working on your humanity may or may not get you a raise. Working on your humanity may or may not have you break out and strike it rich. But working on your humanity is something that you need once all the jobs are done, once all the family is either with you or gone. Well, when you're alone, your humanity is what you need, because that humanity is what you apply to yourself in order to show self-love and recover from hard times and support those who need it, and have a guidepost and have a hint of a clue of a way forward that isn't, diabolical, abusive, harsh, hateful. So our humanity is a muscle. And if we don't ever, lift, we don't ever work on it, we tend to sometimes mimic what some other people's demonstration of humanity looks like. Sometimes we, and that's not really meant to be a harsh thing. What I want to highlight is that there are times when people may really not have that sensitivity at the same level as someone else. So let's say you're entering a conversation with someone and they are an extreme empath and they have such a heightened sensitivity to how people feel. Unless you are also an extreme empath in that same way that they are, because you could be an extreme empath in a different type of way. Yours could be visual, yours could be audible. But unless you are an extreme empath in the same way that they are, you aren't really going to energy match with them right there. You will have to either mimic, which is see the things that they react to, or the things that they don't think are funny, or the things that they choose not to engage with or choose not to do, none for me, and use that as your own guidepost. And so I don't know if you all ever saw a movie called Multiplicity. Multiplicity was a hilarious movie about clones. And all of the clones came from the original, and then there was one clone that came from another clone. And so, I make it a smack on the wrist for the sensitivity of evoking that movie here. But the clone of the clone, let's just say, was making a copy of a copy. And so it wasn't as sharp as the others. It wasn't doing the same, wasn't demonstrating and showing up in the world in the same way. You know, the guy kept a slice of pizza in his wallet and all these sorts of quirky things that we loved. It made the movie, by the way, and they were all Michael Keaton. So watch the movie. Maybe I'll put a clip, just put a clip of the movie in here.
I like pizza. I like it.
Okay, so, but what you want to remember is that when you are only taking the social cues, emotion cues of someone else who is an emotional empath, as opposed to finding your own direct link or your own direct connection or your own motivation, then it ends up being just not as sharp. It ends up being not as authentic, and you don't know when to turn it off. So a joke I like to make is, you know, people who aren't used to being like extremely, you know, those people who are so extremely nice. Oh, they're so nice. They just are so happy to meet everyone, and they open the door for everyone, and everyone gets a big smile. And unless you are that type of person, you can try and mimic that. I promise you, you don't have the stamina to keep up with it. But more than that, you don't know when to turn it off. You've actually gone over all of your natural way of being and instincts to mimic someone else. So none of your cues and your touchy-feelies and your antennas are actually connected to what you're doing. You're just driving right over top of all of those emotions and those cues and those, wait a minute, is that right? How did that go over? How do people feel? And because you're driving over top of all of those motions and all of those cues and indicators, you have no idea when it's overkill. You've missed the cue. We've switched to a different mode now. So all of that to say, tune into your own inner voice, your own cues, your own instincts. So here we are back full circle talking about instinct. So let's start with nurturer. All of us have some sense of nurturing, whether we be mothers or not, or plant moms or dog moms or cat moms or mom, cat dogs and cat dads. We all have this sort of nurturing instinct. And one way that it shows up most immediately is when a new person starts on the job, or a young person, or someone who you don't feel has that voice, or they're not, they need patience. They need what isn't maybe readily available on this job. And so your nurturer says, I'm going to take an extra second and show it to them. Or I'm going to forgive, what they did there. So that nurturer says, I'm going to provide what I don't think is being provided for that person. And it can be very close to this protector instinct, but I'll make the distinction in a minute for what the protector instinct is. The nurturer really is, I'm going to provide, I'm going to even coddle and do so much to make sure that this person has the extra time they need to get their own sea legs, the extra patience, the extra guidance. So it's in some ways wider spread than the protective instinct, that nurturing instinct. And so new people on the job, or young people on the job, or just people who you feel might have this bit of a learning curve, you tend to be a nurturer. Now, who you decide needs nurturing, that's a big question. Sometimes it's for people that look just like them. Sometimes for people it is, people who they have a soft spot in their heart for. Sometimes for people it is, classically marginalized groups. Sometimes it is people who don't have the same grasp of the language. Sometimes it is people who don't have the same experience or don't have the same education. And so depending on who you decide needs that nurturing is everything. But you do have and nurturing instinct. You might be pushing it down, because this is a job where we don't do all of that. We don't nurture here. You come ready and you get it done. And I would imagine that if you really took a moment to think about it, you could pinpoint the places where you've had an extra amount of patience, extra amount of care and instruction for some that you haven't for others. And so I'll just go to number 2 and say the second way that you have that nurturing is sometimes for yourself. Sometimes you are nurturing your own self in these spaces. And sometimes that is, I'm not going to push myself to do that. Even though they're asking me to do that, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to apply some boundaries and say no. Or, they really have this, that could be about a deadline. That could be about a way they want you to show up. That could be about the social hour that we are all working on, like how to be social at work. It's like they're not friends, but they're kind of friends. And I also see them every day, way more than I even see my own family. And so how do I nurture myself in that space and be honest to me in that space and allow myself extra room? If someone asks me a question, not have to answer immediately, but to kind of take a second and think. And interviews is a good example of that. You're in an interview and someone asks you, what is your greatest weakness? Unless you've been planning it ahead of time, you don't have a ready answer, because it's actually a pretty complex question. And even if you have prepared it a hard time, you have to, in that millisecond, boil down the whole tone of the interview. If you've kind of underplayed yourself the whole interview, you want to take this moment to give yourself a little boost. If you've been so ego kind of driven this during this whole interview, or very doing a great job of advertising yourself during this meeting, during this interview, you might take that second to actually really, take the deep dive into where you need work and just like be that honest, pure self, right? To balance out who you're presenting yourself to be. So that nurturing, sometimes we give ourselves, and it's extremely important because it's the difference in you burning out or abusing yourself. A lot of individuals in the medical field, it wasn't until I saw it firsthand that people in the medical field have such a burden on them to just push their bodies. And even now where people are not making themselves available because that job pays more or that job pays more, it's even more burden on those that are like holding down the fort. And you see traveling nurses and traveling technologists and traveling doctors, with doctors joining other practices, all in a way to kind of share resources so that they can take a little bit more time and care for self-care. And we don't think about the self-care of those individuals that are helping us in the medical field all the time. So that nurture shows up at work when we think about ourselves, when we take a moment and think about ourselves. And we're actually in a time now where it's expected that you will self-maintain, especially working from home, that you will self-nurture in that home space. Okay, so present for you, I'm under a time crunch, so I actually have to give you the other 4 in a very short period of time, or else the video will be all disjointed because I'll have like a different outfit on and everything. And I'll be sleepier than I am right now. So, survival. Let me show you how you, let me tell you how you actually operate under survival instinct at work. If you're standing next to the people who you think hold your future in their hands, or you're agreeing with the people who you feel hold your future in their hands, or you are just being quiet because you feel that the people who you don't want to rub the people the wrong way, the important people, the powerful people the wrong way. Those are all survival mechanisms, and they're things that you put in place to just make sure that you stay safe. Now, who you decide those people are means so much, because let's say you work for a company and there's all these CEOs, and let's say it's a male facing organization, or you're one minority in a mainly Caucasian race organization, or you are one Caucasian in a mainly African American or mainly BIPOC race organization. You might decide that not only are the CEOs, the important people, and the people that hold my future in their hands. But you might decide that these people who I consider my partners, they see me, they get me because we are the same. All the women, all of the BIPOCs, all of the people under 20, kind of culminating and gathering and finding community together and safety. And then, we talked earlier about mimicking and then kind of putting on the same persona and developing this and establishing this persona and kind of establishing their way of being is normal. They're all survival mechanisms and they are fine. There's something I always say, that's fine if that's something that's safety for you. But the important thing to remember is that it can be exclusionary towards other groups. And it's probably not as safe as you think, because ultimately people do want to be told the truth, or they do want to meet someone different than themselves. They want to be challenged. They want to be intrigued, right? And they won't necessarily have that with sameness. Okay. 4, survival. You're also in a career path or not in a career path out of a survival mechanism. Maybe you find your odds of survival and thriving in this environment. I'll just say surviving this environment or this time period or this city that you live in is just not to work at all, or to only work at this particular job that's only going to use this amount of my skill set, or to only work at this type of organization because this is the type of organization that feels safe and secure. For example, many of you want to be an entrepreneur in your heart, but you don't want to take that leap of faith that it takes to step out on your own to do it. And that is a survival mechanism. And it's very closely connected to your sympathetic nervous system that says anything outside of the safety of this job that someone else could give me, or the safety of this particular position, or the safety of this salary range, or the safety of this this location, or the safety of not having any job that I need to report to and other people that I need to contend with. That is survival for me. And I just challenge you to every day take a step closer to challenging that, to going in the face of that, because the safety that you perceive is not necessarily the safety that actually exists. And even working for these tried and true industries like the medical industry, like the banking industry, like the government, you'll still have to challenge yourself even within those spaces. Wherever you go, there you are. You'll still have to challenge yourself to speak your thoughts, to be true to yourself. So it's really a muscle that you want to continue to build a little bit every day. Okay, finally, protection. Okay. That protective instinct that you are protective of those that you feel have no voice. And it all comes down to, who do you think that is? Do you think that it's people that remind you of yourself that have no voice? Do you think that it is senior citizens that have no voice? Do you think that it's BIPOCs that have no voice? Do you feel women have no voice? Whoever it is that you feel have no voice, you have this protective instinct. You have this protective instinct that you will hurt or harm anyone that brings them danger. And the one that is, they reflect who I see myself as, or who I was in the beginning of my career, that's probably the strongest. You want to really challenge and take a chance to protect that person that you feel represents you. And that inner child, it could be that new employee on their first day of work. Just remembering that is important, because more often than not, you are projecting. And that isn't to say you shouldn't protect people, but really understand who it is that you are protecting and your motivations for protecting them, so that you aren't projecting. Right? So that it's not just like, oh, you're asking that person to be you, and they aren't you. They might make a choice that you didn't make, or take a turn that you didn't take. And so you are also in that protective instinct anytime you see a bully. You may not even know who that person is bullying. You might just see them generally, or you might just see it come across on some paperwork, and it's triggering to you. And that's the part of you that's in protective mode. And it means that you've developed a muscle for seeing what is taking advantage of and what is burdensome on the psyche of individuals, burdensome on the mind and the hearts of individuals. And that part of you that's protective takes over. I don't care how, experienced you are, or executive you are, and how polished you are and professional you are, and how many years you have in the game. When that instinct to protect takes over, you throw it all to the wind. And it's not something you can prepare for. What you can build the muscle for is, why do I feel this person needs protection? Why do I feel this person is perpetuating an offense that no one has expressed? So you can begin to unpack that. You can begin to really try and understand why you are offended by something, and then voice it. And then voice it, because the more you give voice to your inner child, inner new person, inner victim, so to speak, the more you lay off of being this avenger of all victimized, because you have given the voice and the power back to that victimized, starting with one. So I hope that this was helpful for you. 6 ways that you are applying these instinctual reactions, instinctual ways of being in your workplace. All right, I'll talk to you next time.